The candles at Bavette's cast everything in amber, and for a moment, just one, I let myself believe it was going to be different. I had reserved the private dining room in the back, the one with mahogany walls and low-hanging chandeliers. I had ordered the wine before anyone arrived. I wore the cobalt blazer I'd bought specifically for this night, the one that made me look like someone who'd earned something. Because I had. 3 days earlier, I'd been promoted to vice president of strategy at my firm, at 29, the youngest VP in the company's 40-year history. My boss, Mr. Farrow, a careful, silver-haired man who did not give compliments lightly, had shaken my hand and said, "You are exactly what this company needed, and I want you to know we see it." I cried in the elevator on the way back to my desk. Not because I was sad, because I couldn't remember the last time someone told me they saw me. That night, sitting at the head of that table with the crystal wine glass in my hand, I watched my family. My mother was fussing with her napkin. My father was squinting at the menu like it was written in a foreign language. And my brother, 31 years old, currently between opportunities, currently sleeping in my parents' basement in Dayton, currently funded largely by me, was scrolling his phone under the table. My 2 colleagues, Tara and Jin, were being warm and generous the way good people are, when they sense something is wrong at a dinner but can't name it. Mr. Farrow was telling my parents about the project I'd led that had saved the firm $11 million last quarter. He was leaning forward, genuinely enthusiastic. My mother was looking at my brother's phone screen. I took a sip of wine. I told myself, hold on, 1 more hour, they just need to warm up, they'll see it. I had been telling myself that for 29 years, I was very good at it. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. Not the nice part. The part where the houses all look the same and the yards are practical, not decorative. We had a split level with beige carpet and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee grounds. From the outside, it looked like any other house on the street. From the inside, it was a kingdom with a very clear hierarchy, and I was not in it. My brother is 2 years older than me. His name was spoken in our house with a different weight than mine. Softer, warmer, the way you might distinguish between saying someone's name and saying a prayer. From my earliest memory, he was the center. I was the atmosphere. I remember being 7, running home from school with a perfect score on my reading test. 100%. A gold star. A note from the teacher that said, "Exceptional work." I burst through the front door and ran to the kitchen, where my mother was folding laundry on the counter, watching my brother build something out of Legos. It wasn't anything in particular, just a lopsided tower of random colors, already falling apart. "Mom," I said, "Mom, look." She didn't look. "Your brother is being so creative right now," she said. "Can you be quiet for a minute?" I stood there with my test paper until my arm got tired. Then I walked to my room and put it in my desk drawer. That was the first time I understood that the world inside our house ran on a different logic than the one I'd been taught in school. In school, achievement meant something. At home, achievement was noise. The only currency was being lovable. And somehow, from the very beginning, that was a thing I didn't know how to be. Or at least, that was the story they'd already decided. What I understand now, and what it took me a long time to put into words, is that some families designate one child as the keeper of all the love and one child as the keeper of all the labor. It's not always conscious. It's not always intentionally cruel, but it is always damage. I was the laborer. I kept my grades perfect. I stayed quiet. I learned that asking for things only led to a comparison I would always lose. Your brother needs this. Your brother is going through something. You're so capable, you don't need it. I was 9 years old the first time I heard that sentence. Capable. They used it on me the way you'd describe a good appliance. When I was 13, I fell off my bike on the way home from school and tore up my knee on the pavement. I could see gravel embedded in the skin. I limped 3 blocks home with blood running into my sock. My father looked up from the couch when I came in. He looked at my knee. Then he looked back at the television. "There's a first aid kit under the bathroom sink," he said. That was all. No "are you okay?" No movement toward me. Just a sentence and then the TV. The year before, my brother had stepped on a thumbtack at a friend's house, and my mother had taken him to urgent care for a thumbtack. I cleaned my knee myself with hydrogen peroxide, biting down on a washcloth so I didn't make noise. Noise meant being dramatic. I bandaged it from a box that was almost out of date. Then I did my homework. By high school, I had learned to exist in the margins of the family. Present but unnoticed, useful but unremarked upon. I got straight A's and stopped showing them my report cards. I made the varsity track team and didn't mention it at dinner. I applied to Northwestern on a full merit scholarship and only told them after I was already accepted, because I'd learned that sharing a hope before it became a fact just gave them something to be lukewarm about. When I told them about Northwestern, my mother asked if I could commute from home to save money. My brother, who had graduated high school the year before with a 2.4 GPA, was taking one community college class per semester and figuring things out. He did not commute. He did not work. He mostly played video games and occasionally helped my father with yard work, which my parents described as him really coming into his own. I was 17 when my father lost his job at the distribution center, where he'd worked for 12 years. It happened in October, when the air in Dayton had gone sharp and the leaves were all brown. He sat at the kitchen table for 2 weeks working through the want ads, getting nowhere. The refrigerator got emptier, and then one morning, my mother appeared in the doorway of my bedroom. "We need your help," she said. "You're 17, you're capable." That word again. I got a job at the Target on Wilmington Pike 3 days later, weekday afternoons, both weekend days. A month after that, I picked up dinner shifts at a diner on Salem Avenue, the kind of place where the coffee is always hot and the tips are modest but reliable. Between the two, I was bringing in about $900 a month. I handed almost all of it over. Not because they asked me to, exactly. It was more of an atmosphere, a pressure. The kitchen light that flickered because nobody paid the electric bill until the second notice. The way my mother would mention in passing that the car payment was due. The way my brother's phone was somehow always paid for. I paid it. Nobody said that out loud. I paid it. When I got my first paycheck, $312, I held it for about 60 seconds before my mother walked into my room. She held out her hand. I put the check in it. She glanced at the amount and said, "You're going to need to pick up more shifts." She walked out. No thank you. No acknowledgement that I was 17, running on 5 hours of sleep, still trying to keep my GPA high enough for the scholarship I hadn't told them about yet. I want to be honest here about why I didn't stop. I think people read stories like mine and shake their heads and ask, "Why didn't you just leave?" And the answer is not simple, and it is not stupidity. I had spent 17 years being trained to believe that my usefulness was the closest thing to love I was going to get. Stopping meant accepting the thing I'd been running from my whole life, that without the utility, I was nothing to them. That I would become, officially, a person they didn't need, and therefore a person who did not exist in their world at all. That hope that if I gave enough, if I succeeded enough, the warmth would come, kept me paying for a very long time. I went to Northwestern. I commuted my first year as they'd asked. I moved to campus sophomore year, which they took as a personal betrayal. I still sent money home every month. $200, then $300, then $4, when my father's part-time job didn't cover the car insurance. I ate dining hall food and wore the same 3 pairs of shoes for 2 years, and I sent money home. My brother, during this time, quit community college, took up woodworking for 6 months, then announced he was going to become a personal trainer. My parents enrolled him in a certification program at their expense, not savings. There were no savings, their credit cards. And when I found out I was somehow listed as an emergency contact on their Discover card, I didn't say anything about it. I just quietly made sure the minimum payment was met. I graduated summa cum laude. My parents came to the ceremony. My father shook my hand. My mother said, "You look tired." 2 weeks later, I started at a strategy consulting firm in Chicago at $78,000 a year. I moved into a studio in Logan Square, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt the specific relief of closing a door behind me and knowing nobody was going to come through it uninvited. I still sent money home, $2,500 a month, automatic transfer, every first of the month for 4 years. I don't know when it stopped feeling like a choice. It just became part of the math of my life. Salary minus taxes minus rent minus $2,500. What was left was mine. The $2,500 was rent. I paid for the right to believe I was still a daughter. My brother, by this point, had pivoted from personal training to drop shipping to real estate investing, which in practice meant he watched YouTube videos about real estate while my parents paid for his protein powder. I paid for their streaming subscriptions. I had not been asked. My mother mentioned once that she didn't understand why Netflix kept charging them. and I said without thinking, "I'll just add it to my card." She said, "Oh, good," then asked how my brother was doing in his real estate coursework. The promotion happened on a Tuesday. Mr. Farrow called me into his office at 2 in the afternoon and offered me the VP of Strategy role, a position I'd been quietly and methodically building toward for 4 years. $140,000 plus bonus. I kept my expression professional. I called home from the parking garage because I thought, this has to be it. This was the unmissable moment. I dialed my mother. "That's nice," she said. "Is there somewhere to park at the restaurant you're booking? Your father's back has been bad, and he doesn't want to walk far." I booked Bavette's. I paid for their hotel. I bought my brother a new shirt because he told my mother he had nothing appropriate to wear, and my mother relayed this to me as though it required my immediate intervention. I bought him a navy button-down from Nordstrom. He did not thank me. I also invited Tara and Jin from my team and Mr. Farrow. I wanted witnesses, not in a vengeful way. I want to be honest about that. I wanted the people who saw my value to be in the same room as the people who never had. I thought maybe it would work by proximity. I thought if they heard it from the outside, they would finally believe it. The dinner started the way those dinners always start, stiff and overlit with effortful warmth. Mr. Farrow leaned toward my parents within the first 10 minutes and said, "You must be so proud. What your daughter has built at this firm in 4 years is genuinely remarkable. The project she led last spring. I've been in this industry 15 years, and it was the most sophisticated strategic analysis I've seen." He said this warmly, unambiguously, without any room for reinterpretation. My mother picked up her water glass and took a sip. "She's always been very focused," she said, "the way you'd describe a dog that had been well trained." Jin said I was the best analytical mind he'd worked with. Tara said she'd learned more from me in a year than in 2 years of grad school. My father nodded at these things, then turned to my brother. "You still thinking about the real estate path? I've been reading some things. Might be a good market opening up in Columbus." My brother talked for 6 minutes about a podcast he'd been listening to. My parents were riveted. I watched this happen and felt something I had felt 100 times before, a particular kind of invisibility that is worse than being ignored, because you are technically present. You're sitting right there. People are talking about you, but you're not in the room. You're behind glass. Then the dessert menu arrived, and my mother folded her hands. Something in her posture shifted. I recognized it, a deliberateness, a gathering. I had the sudden irrational thought, "Don't," but I said nothing. I watched her. "You know," she said, and her voice was the kind of calm that precedes something she'd been saving up. "I've been sitting here listening to everyone talk about you, and I'm sure it's all true. You've always been very good at doing what's expected." She paused. The table had gone still. "But I want to be honest with you. If you're waiting for me to feel what they feel," she gestured toward my colleagues, "that's just not going to happen. Your brother could walk in here having accomplished nothing, and I would feel something for him that I don't feel for you. I don't know how to explain it except to say, you've always felt like someone we were responsible for. He's always felt like someone we love. I don't think that's going to change." Tara made a sound like she'd been struck. Mr. Farrow's hand tightened around his wine glass. Jin looked at the tablecloth. My brother looked up from his phone. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, just for a second. Then he looked back down. My father said nothing. He cut his steak. He put a piece in his mouth. He chewed. I sat there for what felt like a very long time, but was probably 10 seconds. Waiting for the collapse, for the desperate familiar scramble to fix it, the apology rising in my throat as if I were the one who needed to apologize. It didn't come. What came instead was clarity. The kind that arrives in winter when you step outside and the cold hits you so cleanly that your mind goes empty and then fills back up with only what's necessary. What was necessary was this. I had paid for this table. I had paid for her flat, her hotel, her steak. I had paid for her phone plan and her Netflix, and 4 years of my brother's failed certification programs. I had put my name on their car loan at 22 because they'd asked, and I hadn't known how to say no. I had sent $2,500 a month for 4 years because I was trying to buy something that was never on sale. And she had just told me, in front of my boss and my colleagues and the white-jacketed waiter standing very still near the dessert cart, that it had never worked, that it could never work. That was the gift of it. Not that she was cruel. She had always been cruel. but that she said it out loud, where I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. I placed my wine glass on the table, gently, a small, precise click. "Okay," I said. I picked up my purse, walked to the host stand and settled the bill. $437 before tip. I tipped 20% because I'd waitressed and I knew what it was to depend on a stranger's decency. Then I walked out of Bavette's. The November air hit me like a wall. 28 degrees. No coat, no reason to be standing on Randolph Street, but I didn't go back in for the coat. I stood on the sidewalk and took a breath. The city moved around me. Cabs, music from a bar down the block, someone laughing very hard about something. I was in none of it. I was in the very particular silence of a decision. I got in a cab, I went home. I sat on my couch for 15 minutes without turning on a light. Then I opened my laptop. I went to my bank first. I pulled up the recurring transfers, 3 of them. $2,500 to my parents' joint account, $450 to my brother's checking, started the year before when he said he needed help with transitional expenses. $200 for the car insurance, which I'd begun paying 6 months ago after my mother mentioned it 3 times in 1 week. $3,150 a month, $37,800 a year. I sat with that number. I knew why I had been paying it. I want to be clear about this. It wasn't stupidity and it wasn't weakness. What I experienced growing up had a name, as my therapist would later explain to me, parentification. The process by which a child is assigned the emotional and financial responsibilities of an adult family member. It rewires you. It teaches you that your value is transactional, that love must be earned through function, and that stopping the function means losing whatever approximation of love you had. I hadn't been paying $2,500 a month out of generosity. I had been paying it out of a desperate, trained need to remain necessary. To remain in some way, their daughter. She had just told me, cleanly and in front of witnesses, that I had never been. I deleted the transfer to my parents. I deleted the transfer to my brother. I deleted the car insurance payment. I went to the cell carrier's website and separated my line from the family plan. Their 3 lines would receive a payment failure notification in the morning. I logged into Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max. I changed the passwords, I hit sign out of all devices. And yes, it was a little petty. I knew that. It felt like taking back something small that I had handed over without thinking, and taking it back felt like a beginning. Then I called my bank and told them I needed to discuss removing myself as a co-signer on a vehicle loan. They said someone would call me back in the morning. I said that was fine. By midnight, I was in bed. I expected the guilt to arrive the way it always had, a tide, steady and suffocating, every time I'd tried to take something back for myself. Instead, I slept 8 hours, a flat, dreamless sleep, the kind I hadn't had in years. The texts came in the morning, a lot of them. My mother asking why her Netflix wasn't working, my brother asking why his Venmo showed a declined transfer, my mother again saying the phone company had sent a notification, my father tersely, "Call us." I read them the way you read a news story about something that happened in a city you've never been to. Curious, distant, no urgency. I didn't respond. I made coffee. I went for a run along the lakefront, which I hadn't done on a weekday morning in months because I'd always used that hour to field phone calls from home. The lake was gray-green and enormous. I ran until my lungs ached in a good way. Then I got breakfast at a place on Clark Street I'd walked past 100 times and never had time to stop at. I sat at the counter with a book I'd been carrying in my bag for 3 weeks without opening, and I ate eggs and read for an hour. Nobody needed anything from me. I sat in that diner in the very ordinary morning, and I almost couldn't process it, the simplicity of wanting nothing except eggs and coffee and a window and the next page. 4 months later, on a Thursday evening in March, I was in my kitchen making pasta when my building intercom buzzed. I pulled up the door camera on my phone. My mother and my brother. They had driven 8 hours from Dayton. They'd apparently waited in the lobby until another resident let them in, then come up and knocked. My mother in her good coat, hair frizzy from the highway. My brother in the navy button-down I had bought him. He looked annoyed, the way he always looked when he'd been made to go somewhere he didn't want to be. I thought about not answering. The old version of me would have hidden in the bedroom, turned off the lights, waited them out. But I had just been nominated for a board committee at work. I had booked a solo trip to Portugal for June, the first real vacation I'd taken in 4 years. I had been seeing a therapist, Dr. Okonkwo, who had spent our first 3 sessions gently explaining to me that what I'd experienced had a clinical name and that my compulsive giving had not been love. It had been a survival strategy that had long outlived its usefulness. I was not the person who hid in her own apartment. I opened the door. I stood in the doorway and did not step back. My mother looked at me with the expression she used when she was deciding which approach would work. She chose aggrieved. "We came because you won't answer our calls. Your brother is in a situation." "What kind of situation?" My brother crossed his arms. "The real estate thing didn't work out," he said, which was actually the most honest thing I'd heard him say in years. He'd signed a lease in Columbus. Apparently, the investing had pivoted into him moving there to pursue opportunities, and the landlord was suing him for unpaid rent. He needed legal help. He needed money. "He's your brother," my mother said. "I understand that." "He needs you." I let that sit. "You drove 8 hours," I said, "to ask me to cover the consequences of a decision you made after I stopped covering everything else. That's not fair." Her voice was climbing. "We are your family, after everything we've done." "I have a very clear record of everything that's been done," I said calmly. It surprised me how calm I was. "I'm not going to help with this." Her face shifted. The aggrieved expression fell away, and something harder and older came through. "You have always been selfish, since you were a little girl. Cold. You got the scholarship, the job, everything, and you act like we owe you something. We raised you." I looked at her, really looked at her. The lines around her mouth, the way her eyes moved when she was composing what came next. She looked like someone who had been angry for a very long time and had learned to live inside it the way you live inside a house. "I used to feel sorry that I couldn't be easier to love," I said. "I don't anymore." She stared at me. "I have somewhere to be," I said. "I'm going to ask you to leave, both of you." My brother opened his mouth. "Now, please." There was something in my voice, some new frequency that I hadn't had before, or maybe had always had and never used. He closed his mouth. My mother said something about regret, about family, about what I was throwing away. I listened to the whole thing without moving. Then I said goodbye, and I closed the door. I threw the deadbolt, put the chain on, stood with my back against the door in the quiet of my apartment. I waited for the grief, the guilt, the implosion of feeling that should have come from closing a door on the people who raised you. What came instead was quieter and much stranger. It was the feeling of a room after you've opened all the windows and let the stale air out, not empty, clean. My brother figured out his legal situation. I don't know how. I stopped monitoring. My parents continued to live in Dayton. I assume they made adjustments. People do, when the option of not adjusting is removed. My life in Chicago kept growing. Dr. Okonkwo told me once that healing from a childhood like mine happens slowly, and then suddenly like a plant that looks dormant and then blooms. I thought it was a little too tidy when she said it. Then I noticed one morning in April that I had gone 4 full days without thinking about whether my family was okay. Not because I was suppressing it, just because it was genuinely not in my mind. The plant had bloomed. I went to Portugal in June. I stayed in a small city called Évora and walked through streets that were 2,000 years old. I ate pastries every morning and read 3 books and spoke to almost no one for a week. It was the best 7 days of my adult life. At work, I made partner track. Mr. Farrow told me, with characteristic understatement, that I had a long runway ahead. Tara got promoted and we celebrated at a bar in Wicker Park, and I laughed until my face hurt. Jin moved to the London office, and we still texted about a show we'd been watching in parallel for 2 years. I met someone. His name is Alec. He's a structural engineer, quiet and precise in a way I understand, with a sense of humor that operates on a frequency most people miss. His family is loud and affectionate, and they welcomed me the way I had always, somewhere very small and private, hoped to be welcomed. His mother hugged me at their 4th of July cookout and said, "We've heard so much, get in here." And I stood in her arms for just a moment longer than it's necessary and felt something arrive that I hadn't known I was still waiting for. Not approval, not validation. Just warmth freely given with no account kept anywhere. There's a bench near the lakefront where I run most mornings. It faces east, and in summer the light comes off the water in a way that makes everything look slightly unreal, like a photograph that decided to become a place. I sat there one morning last August, coffee in hand, watching a kid on a bike attempt the same curb over and over and fall off every single time. I thought about a 7-year-old holding a spelling test above her head in a doorway, arm aching, waiting for someone to look. I thought about the girl who walked 3 blocks into a February wind with her waitressing tips to buy a gallon of milk and came home to silence. I thought about the woman who sat at a beautiful restaurant and waited for a miracle that was never going to come, because you cannot buy your way into being seen by someone who has decided not to see you. You can only, eventually, stop trying, and then you can go be seen by someone else. What I know now is that my mother was right about one thing. I was efficient. I was always efficient, and efficiency, given enough time and enough reason, reaches its logical conclusion. The transfers are gone, the cosign is removed, the door is closed. I finished my coffee. The kid on the bike finally made the curb. He threw his hands up like he'd won the whole world, and I laughed, loud and unguarded, alone on a bench by the lake, with nothing left to carry.